This is probably the best looking bike that I've ever tested, but there's one thing that I'm not too sure about, and it's down there. Can't see it? Hold on. Down there? I still can't see it, can you? And it's this little thing. It's the TQ HPR 50.
So let's start with the negatives, or what I perceive as negatives when it comes to low-powered e-bikes in general. It's not just this bike, and that's simply that I don't understand the low-power concept. Why go through the hassle of building an e-mountain bike when the power is nothing compared to a full-powered bike? On paper, the TQ HPR 50 is 50 Newton meters, which isn't too far off from the 85 Newton meters of peak torque that we get from a Bosch or Shimano full-powered motor. But in reality, the latter motors feel like 4 times more powerful, and they also deliver a lot of that power from standstill. Power when you need it, when the power from a low-powered motor is only there high up in the cadence range. Add to that a short range. When maxing out this thing, it doesn't last half a day, and you constantly need to monitor the battery on longer rides or get a range extender, which adds weight and removes the option for having a water bottle. Low weight is often used as an argument until you find that some full power bikes don't weigh much more. If we're going back to this bike in particular, another problem that I have is related to my riding skills or my lack of riding skills. This is a size medium bike and it's just a little bit too small for me. Size-wise it works okay, but it is a mullet and sometimes I feel a bit off balance. My body position on bikes in general is sometimes too far back, especially when I'm tired and when I'm not on top of things. I have to be positioned correctly on this bike to make the most of it. I do know a little bit about riding shorter bikes, as I have a silly little dirt jumper that will kill me if I get lazy. But I like a bike that has my back, like the CANYON Drive On, which I still keep at the top of my list of the best e-mountain bikes. I'm doing a deep dive into that bike and the competition in this video. Size large might be the solution here, or maybe I should learn to ride a bike. Or maybe this isn't the bike for me.
It's not you, it's me.
So is this really such a bad bike then? Here's the thing, I've been riding this bike for over 4 months now, and the reality is that it's the nicest, most versatile and best looking e-mountain bike I've ever tested. And over the years, that's many bikes. Let's break this down. This is, as mentioned, a mullet. It's got a Fox 38 Performance Elite up front and it still weighs under 20 kilos. It's hilarious to ride through the terrain, and even if it gets rough, this bike will handle it. The motor is dead silent and most people will not even know that this is an e-bike when you pass them. I think that's something that many potential buyers of this particular bike appreciate. And when flying through the forest on a Spectral ONfly that feels pretty close to an analog bike, but on steroids, I cannot for my life understand why you would want any bike without a motor. The fun factor is just so much greater, and this bike rides so amazingly well. It's that kind of bike that gives back when you challenge it. When you push, the bike will reward you with an abundance of agility and support in any type of terrain. An image of a 911 Dakar edition comes up in my head for some reason. The Spectral ONfly is based on the new Spectral, so it hasn't got anything to do with the Spectral On. Just to clarify things, I did take the new analog Spectral for a very short ride, and it seems to be a bit beefed up from previous generations. For being an analog bike, this is a bike I really appreciate. It's versatile enough for regular trail riding and capable enough when it gets scary. The only thing I felt was a bit of front wheel lift in the climbs. That front wheel lift sensation is completely gone on the Spectral ONfly, despite its short rear end. Possibly the battery in the down tube helps. So it does climb well too, even if you have to work for it. The bike design is stunning. It's got an interesting color that seems to shift depending on what day of the week it is. I like the matte black finish in the rear, and the proportions are just right. It looks sleek, stealthy and powerful at the same time. Why don't all bikes look like this, analog or powered? You can hardly tell that this bike is powered by electricity. It's a tiny little TQ HBR50 motor down there, if you look closely. It's a technical marvel, and most of the times it's absolutely dead quiet. But maybe the lack of noise adds to that sensation of this being a low-powered motor. As mentioned, there's only power a bit further up the cadence range. When I ride full-powered e-bikes, I often use eco mode and only power up when I need it or when I get too tired. Slippery today. With this motor, I cranked up all settings in the app to the max, and I never rode it in any other mode than the highest mode. And still, I get that feeling that there isn't much more power coming from this motor than Eco or at least Tour mode on a Bosch motor. I'm guessing it's somewhere in between. Since I usually have this motor set to max, the battery doesn't last that long. For half-day runs, it's absolutely fine. But for longer rides, you want to power down and monitor the battery capacity or get the optional range extender. I have ridden a few other low-powered motors, and the TQ motor isn't really weaker than any other motor in this category. This is just the nature of this bike and motor type. So there is a price to pay for that sleek and stealthy look. Still, despite my lack of understanding, this is a rapidly growing market. The most well-known and closest competitors are Specialized Turbo Levo SL and Trek Fuel EXE. I've ridden both, and I think Canyon is currently giving those bikes a very hard time right now, especially when we look at the spec list of this top-end Spectral ONfly. I've already mentioned the Fox 38 Performance Elite fork. It's the same fork as the factory version, but without those gold stanchions. It's 160mm of travel, but if you need more, it's easy to increase that to 170 or even 180mm with a simple shaft replacement. Not that you need it though, but if you ride very steep, it's nice to have that option. 180 might be a stretch, but I feel that 170mm is often a sweet spot on many e-bikes. I don't think I need to mention how amazing this fork is, so we'll move on to the rear, where you might expect a Fox X2 shock. But instead there's an X shock here, an eMTB tuned version of it, which I don't know what it means. Not that it matters though, I feel it works well, and the rear linkage is just as important as the shock itself. There's overall good support coming from the rear, and I never bottomed out despite using the full travel. It's only 150mm in the rear, but those millimeters are well utilized. I'm guessing the rear suspension ramps up pretty well. The shifter is electric with all that convenience that comes with it. I think this will be the future of many bikes, whether you like it or not. I heard a rumor. It is a rumor, so take it for what it is. But SRAM will ditch wired drivetrains altogether in the near future, from GX and upwards at least. So if you're a sucker for wires, I guess you'll have to stick with Shimano in the future. This is a newish type of derailleur that bolts on directly to the frame, which eliminates the issues with bent derailleur hangers. But it also worries me a bit. Because what is the weakest part here? What will break first? The derailleur or the frame? According to Canyon's representative, it's usually this part that will break, if you will break anything. And apparently, it's surprisingly cheap to replace. The brakes are also of a new type called Stealth, which basically means that the wires are routed differently, closer to the handlebar, making for a cleaner look. I like that, even if there aren't any performance increases here. Apparently, there's a slightly different leverage ratio here, but I can't tell the difference in braking performance from any other cold brake, to be honest. There is a good amount of adjustment possibilities here though, which probably is more important than any hardly noticeable performance gains. Even the dropper is one of these newish types of droppers where you can adjust the travel without any tools. It works absolutely great even in cold weather without any strange hiccups. Super smooth. The wheels are of decent quality as well. These are a hybrid variant, which means that they're built with eMTBs in mind, with more durable spokes and reinforced rims. I can't tell anything about the longevity, but I basically only heard good things about these wheels. On top of that, I feel that the choice of tires is spot on. I like a good nicest tire, and if you think Exo Plus in the rear is enough protection, the performance in all sorts of weather conditions is top-notch. The saddle is good, but my butt likes the Ergon saddles that come with other Canyon bikes better. A personal preference thing here. Up in the cockpit, everything is as expected, with good grips, a 780mm handlebar, and maybe a bit surprising, a 45mm stem, slightly longer than expected. Maybe there is some sort of relation here between the stem and Canyon's KISS system, which is standard on this bike. I've not dabbled too much with this steerer helper, so I can't tell whether this is something I find helpful or not. But if you don't want to use it, there's a cover plate available. So the KISS thing is somewhat proprietary, but what I really like with the cockpit in general is that it's free from any weird solutions like cables running through the headset, for instance. There's nothing that prevents you from modifying the cockpit in whatever way you like. And servicing the headset shouldn't be any problem either when that time comes. It seems as if Canyon has listened to the customers. There really isn't anything to complain about here. The weight is only 19.5 kilos despite that Fox 38 fork up front. If you go for the lesser models, the weight is even lower. Currently, the lineup looks like this: CF8, CF9, and now there's also a new top-end version called CF Limited. The CF8 comes with SRAM suspension and brake components, a Dior drivetrain, and a 32mm wide wheel set that I'm not too sure about. Depends on where you ride, of course. The CF9 comes with Fox suspension parts and Shimano XT parts in the drivetrain and brakes, along with a more suitable wheel set. If it was up to me, I would certainly go for the CF9 between these two bikes. Noticeable is that the shocks on the CF8 and CF9 are a bit smaller. I haven't tested these bikes. I know that the old Specialized Turbo Levo SL worked really well with the RockShox Deluxe shock. But in general, I question eMTBs with too small shocks. It's simply not enough to offer compliance in a heavier bike. On the flip side, these bikes weigh under 19 kilos. Again, depends on where you ride, of course. Then at the very top end, we got the super lightweight CF Limited, complete with lightweight luxury components. I think it's the Fox 36 fork and the fancy wheels that makes the CF Limited almost 1.5 kilos lighter than the more beefed up collective version. All bikes come with the same motor and battery, and the battery is non-removable, and you should consider where you can charge the bike and keep it away from sub-zero temperatures when storing it. Geometry-wise, this is a modern trail bike that also thrives in bike parks. I think it's a good blend here, which makes the bike quick through corners and fun on the flats without any sacrifice when it comes to downhill capabilities. I had a size medium bike with a 470mm reach, which might be just a bit too short for me. Again, I have to mind my body position on this bike. The reach should be considered with other measures, and a slightly longer stem actually makes the bike feel a bit roomier. But a slack head tube moves the handlebar closer to you. The relaxed seat tube angle makes me comfortable when pedaling sitting down. I don't feel cramped in this position despite the somewhat smaller size. Because of the seat tube angle, this bike shouldn't be a good climber. Add to that a short rear end and a 27.5-inch rear wheel. But for some reason I didn't have any real issues with the climbs, even if there are better climbers out there, of course. However, I do wish that the cranks were shorter. There's no reason for having such long cranks on an e-bike. they're only in the way for obstacles, and the first thing that I would do would be to swap them for 160mm cranks. I would most likely choose a size large Spectral Fly-On, because I think that bike would offer a better balance for me and my somewhat lazy riding style. With that said, size medium isn't too small for me. I especially appreciate this size when sitting down, pedaling through narrow terrain. In bike parks, I want a larger size. If you're looking for a super agile, versatile, lightweight, low-powered eMTB, you have a few options nowadays. This really is a growing segment. The most obvious competitors are the new Specialized Turbo Levo SL and the Trek Fuel EXE, where the Trek even has got the same motor as the Canyon. All bikes are really nice bikes, and I cannot find any fault with any of them, except when it comes to the lack of power, of course. They all compare well, and it's not that any bike is much better than the other. What does stand out though is value for money, especially when you look at the top-end bikes, where the CANYON Spectral Fly-On is significantly less pricey. So if you're one of those riders who are into this type of bikes, there isn't much more to say really. Just go ahead and buy it.